Welcome to Hear Something Good on Women's Health and Longevity. We are so grateful to our partner, Always Discreet, that can be found at Walgreens, the women's well-being destination, supporting every stage. Together, we're bringing you something good each week on women's health, and it wouldn't be possible without their support. Today, we're talking with Dr. Karen Koffler, an integrative medicine specialist, about the transitions nearly every woman experiences, but are often misunderstood: perimenopause and menopause. This can be a time of tremendous change, both physically and emotionally. And Dr. Karen Koffler shares insightful, practical ways to not only cope, but to thrive. Dr. Koffler is an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Miami School of Medicine and physician at Lifespan Medical, with an emphasis on longevity medicine. She also has her own private practice focused on women's health and longevity. Welcome back, Dr. Koffler.
It's great to be back with you, Kim.
Many women have heard the term perimenopause, but maybe don't really know what it means. How would you define that in simple terms?
Yeah, so perimenopause is that period of time that leads up to menopause. And menopause, of course, means having gone 1 year without a period. So it's sort of a retrospective definition. But the perimenopausal period can actually last years until a woman ceases having her menses. And in that period of time, there can be some very subtle changes that amplify over time, depending on the woman. So it literally can start in a woman's 30s, later 30s, and be manifesting throughout her 40s.
And how would you know if you're moving into perimenopause? What are the symptoms? What might be evident?
Yeah, so there's sort of earlier symptoms and then later symptoms. And the later symptoms, of course, as you get closer to the ending of your period, the symptoms tend to be a little bit more dramatic. Again, this is extremely person dependent. There are many women who have virtually no symptoms, but there's about 25% of women who have fairly dramatic symptoms. So early on, they can be, like I said, quite subtle. They can be mood changes. They can be a little brain fog, more fatigue. Women can say things like, I just don't feel like myself. There can be loss of enthusiasm for things. There can be subtle changes in their period, maybe lighter flow, maybe heavier flow, maybe shorter in duration, maybe longer in duration. So it can be extremely varied, and they may not necessarily think there's any real change happening, but indeed there's some changes happening within the body at the level of the hormones and the receptors and the cells and their responsiveness.
So what is actually happening hormonally? Why are we going to perimenopause and then menopause?
So there's a change in ovarian responsiveness to a hormone released by the brain called FSH. As our follicle supply, as our eggs are dwindling and our ovaries are going through life, there's just less of a responsiveness. And so that's what's happening at the level of the ovaries. Without the same amount of estrogen being produced, therefore, there's going to be an impact on a variety of tissues because we have receptors for those hormones throughout the body, in the brain, in bone, in heart, in blood vessels, in the gut, in the vaginal tissue, in the bladder. So as those levels become more often wildly fluctuating, especially as you move into later perimenopause, you can have extreme excursions in estrogen levels from very high to very low. That can most definitely impact a woman's mood, her ability to think, her ability to sleep, which is often more a function of progesterone, vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats. Joint pain is often a very common complaint. Palpitations can happen. And then there can be metabolic changes. We can see the development of insulin resistance. We can see elevated cholesterol levels for the first time. That's a really common thing that women notice. You know, they never had cholesterol issues, and now suddenly they have elevated cholesterol. So you can see that it's really the changes in estrogen and progesterone levels can have very manifest symptoms in a woman.
But so interesting and so important because all of those symptoms that you mentioned, whether it's brain fog or the inability to sleep or high cholesterol or metabolic syndrome or particularly brain fog and not feeling like yourself is kind of scary. And so if you don't realize that it's tied to hormonal fluctuations, you probably start looking for all different other reasons or factors. And so I think it's really important for women to understand what is actually happening and on some level to expect some level of symptoms. But as you said, not everybody experiences the same symptoms. So that's what makes it kind of interesting.
Mhm. Agreed, and also it can often be happening at demanding times of a woman's life anyway. If they happen to be raising children or taking care of elderly parents or have job constraints or financial worries, it's so understandable that they would assume those external factors were really at the root of it, and in fact, those external factors can most definitely influence the hormones. So it's sort of a catch-22 for many women.
What are some of the ways that you can get relief from these symptoms?
I think it's first recognizing that you're not crazy, and recognizing that your body is going through a very remarkable change. Many of us can recall in elementary school, we sat down our girls to say, "Okay, here's what's coming." And we explained to them what your period is and what it's gonna feel like and so forth. And we actually need the same kind of course for women in their 40s.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
and to also recognize, just like, there were girls who missed school because they had super heavy periods and other girls who missed their periods for months at a time and didn't think a thing about it. The
Mhm.
menopause and perimenopausal periods are very unique to each woman. So what can we do? Number 1, like I said, recognize that you're undergoing a pretty significant biochemical change and give yourself a break. This is a time to really take stock in your lifestyle. And of course, massive changes all at once, but recognize because your biochemistry is changing, you're going to need to give yourself more time and attention. You're going to need to pay attention to your lifestyle more. You're going to need to secure your sleep, which can be very affected, particularly by dropping progesterone levels. You're going to need to pay attention to how you eat because, boy, how often do I hear about weight gain, particularly in the midsection, as a woman goes through
Mhm.
perimenopause and menopause? Super, super common for a variety of reasons. So you can't continue business as usual as you go through the perimenopausal and menopausal period. Exercise becomes a critical factor. Self-care has to move to a higher priority. And then there are many things that we can do now. There is hormones that we can use. There are supplements that we can use to help women for things like hot flashes. Actually, acupuncture and Chinese medicine have helped women a lot with vasomotor symptoms like hot flashes. Cognitive behavioral therapy actually works incredibly well for hot flashes. And there are medications that are being used to help women who can't take, for instance, hormones. Um, Exercise goes a very long way, ameliorating some of the symptoms like brain fog and so forth.
Mhm.
So there's a ton of things that we can offer women as they go through this period.
But I think it's so important to, as you said, the first thing first is to recognize that this is actually happening and you're not going crazy. I think a lot of people feel like it's just them. So obviously there's lots of symptoms that we've discussed and, things maybe that we haven't mentioned like hair loss, hair thinning, which happens to a lot of us, incontinence, which happens to many people, although it's something we don't typically talk about. But I think, again, part of normalizing these conversations is understanding that incontinence happens to many people,
Mhm.
um, and that there are things we can do in terms of product and kind of really understanding the products that are right for incontinence versus your period is all really important. So, Dr. Koffler, how common is this?
Actually, it's quite common, so it's not age specific, but certainly, as estrogen drops off, there's a change in the lining of the urethra and the bladder, and there's a tendency to have pelvic floor, uh, sort of, laxity. and therefore incontinence. So very, very common. And there's many products. First, it's a reason why many women are prescribed vaginal estrogen. So that is a very effective way of treating that whole region and strengthening the tissue. But just in terms of incontinence, today there are pads that women can almost tailor to the degree of incontinence that they're experiencing. So that's incredibly helpful. And by the way, these are odor reducing. They are super absorbent. They're different from the typical pads that we would use with our menses. And then there's pelvic floor physical therapy that's extremely effective for women in strengthening the pelvic floor.
So I think what's so interesting about being able to have these conversations with you and doctors like you is making us realize that like everybody goes through this. I love what you said about elementary school and preparing young women for their first period. We should be preparing ourselves. I wish I had been more prepared, knowing what the symptoms were and what to expect. So you talk about lifestyle, and lifestyle is a kind of a catch-all. And what are the kind of 3 things that you would do or you would tell people to do as they're entering this transition stage around lifestyle?
So from a nutrition standpoint, because that is sort of the lowest hanging fruit, although it can also be very challenging because of the relationship many of us have developed with food. Number one, make sure you are getting adequate protein. That's super important. And the number that we're using these days, not to get overly scientific, but the number we're thinking women need for sure is at least a gram or 1.2 grams per kilogram. So that does require a conversion. But for someone like me, I need about 68 grams of protein a day. So ensuring adequate protein is really important. The other thing is reevaluate your relationship with sugar, because
Mhm.
the perimenopausal and menopausal period is defined in part by an increase in insulin resistance. Cortisol remains high, which tends to cause weight gain around the midsection and raises blood sugar levels. And now you're losing estrogen, which has been protective against that. So
Mm.
insulin resistance at this time is really common, and that's synonymous with weight gain.
Mm.
Having sugar regularly in your diet worsens that and causes weight gain. That's the nutrition piece. On the exercise piece, I cannot stress enough how important it is to make exercise a part of your lifestyle. Find something you love and do it, and 2 days a week strength train. You've heard me harp on that before. So 2 days a week strength training, because we're losing muscle mass. 100% of us as we age are losing muscle mass. And muscle mass is one of the most important biomarkers of healthy aging. And as you build muscle, you raise testosterone levels, you lower cortisol levels, you actually feed your brain. So you help nurture baby brain cells that can help you in the thinking process. You offset dementia. You're protecting your heart. You're protecting your blood vessels from hypertension. The list goes on and on and on. So exercise is key. And then sleep. Developing great sleep habits are absolutely essential. We see sleep as an important vital sign these days, and getting adequate deep stage sleep really can offset some of the issues that we see in menopause, even as deep sleep is challenged by things like hot flashes and night sweats. And just the lower progesterone, sort of lowers the quality of our sleep. But there are many ways to overcome that, including the use of progesterone and hormones, in order to ensure better sleep.
Well, that's amazing. So those are 3 very practical tips. So last words, as we go from perimenopause to menopause, I've heard you talk about kind of a reset. How should women be thinking about this phase of life?
There's a quality of freedom, actually, that can come when you are not, when you get through menopause. And even as you're going through the transition, first of all, it is a natural process. And we are among the only species that outlive our reproductive potential. So it's pretty remarkable that we get another whole half of life practically as we go through the perimenopause and menopause period. And my feeling is, it's an opportunity for us to use the energies that the body was using in order to go through cycles, which is very energy demanding. That energy can now be used in other directions. And so if women see it as a time to recognize, I've put a lot of energy outward into a whole variety of people and things. And now this is a time for me to reclaim that and ensure that I'm giving myself attention, love, giving myself the best nutrition, fortifying my body, uh, ensuring adequate sleep, nurturing my relationships, finding the things that I love. I really think that we can use this period of time to choose how we're going to live the next half of our lives instead of sort of just going through responding to all the demands. I think it's a really great time for us to make that choice from a deeper place.
Thank you, Karen. I really always enjoy talking to you, and it's always inspiring. And it is so exciting to look at it from this perspective versus like a sort of a chore. Thinking about how we're living our lives for the next half, as you say, is a really important moment. So, again, thank you for the advice and the conversation.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Here are the top takeaways. First, recognize what's happening. Fluctuating hormones that lead to mood changes, lack of energy, sleep disruption, weight gain, and even hair loss are perfectly normal. It's not just you. You're not going crazy, and there are ways to deal with these conditions. Talk to your medical provider to get advice on what makes sense for you. Second, take a lifestyle inventory. This is a time to focus on you and to take care of yourself. To deal with symptoms, make sure you're eating well, including cutting back on sugar and getting plenty of protein. Dr. Koffler recommends 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Exercise is a must. She recommends adding twice weekly strength training to your routine and prioritize getting a good night's sleep every night. Lastly, seek out products to help manage some symptoms. As estrogen drops during perimenopause, there are physiological changes. One result, occasional bladder leaks. Know the difference between products designed for incontinence versus menstrual flow. They serve very different purposes. Thank you for listening, and please share today's episode with others in your life. Have a great day. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.